Welcome. Good evening to everyone. I see we have a few folks, many folks who have already joined. We have a packed agenda today, so we are going to look to kind of jump right into it. Welcome and good evening. My name is Saxon Nelson. I am the Community Engagement Director for Research for Action. And it's an honor for me to be here to share this space with you, the topic, but welcome to our listening party. We are very, very excited. So first and foremost, I just want to recognize that we are now 10 days into Black History Month. Shout out to that. Shout out to the thriving and bubbling and changing of Black culture in this country, especially given the times that we're living in today, given our local, our national, and our global politics that are impacting us all in many, many ways. And, reflecting on Black History Month, reflecting on these changes, it really feels so important to lift up those that make, great impacts in our communities. So here we're looking to lift up the importance, right? And even celebrate Black educators, Black teachers. And I imagine that there'll be so many Black educators, so many Black teachers in this space. We know we have some presenting today, some you'll hear from today, and many of you in the room may be Black educators, Black teachers. So welcome, welcome. As we kind of move forward, I want to speak to our agenda so folks kind of know what we're getting into today. We will be, I gave kind of a short welcome. We'll then get into an overview of the podcast and the Participatory Action Research Project. We'll then get into some of the podcast episode snippets and dialogue. We'll transition from there to a Q&A. We'll preview a microsite, which we're really excited to showcase, and then get into our closing. As we start to kind of get settled into the space, feel free, please, to use the chat, introduce yourself, your name, where you are, where you might be hailing from. Anyone from Kansas City? Sorry about the bad news. As you can see, I'm a big-time Eagles fan with my Kendrick Lamar Super Bowl hoodie. So, us here in Philly are still celebrating. So yes, again, please introduce yourself in the chat, name, where you're from, where you're hailing from. And also our opening question, just to kind of get folks thinking, we're in our last leg of winter, right? We're start of a brand new year. Spring is around the corner. I know it's hard for folks to kind of see that. The days are getting longer. This is true. So tell us what you're looking forward to with this spring coming up. Spring is the season of growth, the season of opportunities. So please, your name, where you're from, and what you might be looking forward to this spring. Few things for housekeeping and a few small asks from me. Please, as we're here for our listening party, it's very important that we look to manage the sound. So please keep your mic muted if you're not speaking. We also have some of our RFA team that you'll meet soon that'll also be looking to keep folks muted. So if your mic is not muted and you're like, oh, I wasn't muted, but now I'm muted, that's because we muted you. And just a little shout out there. So please be mindful of your mic. Second, during the podcast episodes that we'll be listening to, jot down your questions. Please get a pen and paper or your phone if you use your phone to put questions or notes, and jot your questions down. When we get into the Q&A, please use the raised hand feature, the react button in the middle there, to raise your hand and let us know. We'll call on you and welcome you into the space, and you'll be able to ask your question. Again, engage with us in the chat. We have some folks also looking at the chat. Use the react button to share how you're feeling, those hearts, those smiley faces, any way that you want to react and be in the space. We want to welcome that. And two more things. One, we are recording So keep that in mind. We'll look to share this recording with everyone who's attended shortly after the session is over. So want to make sure that is out there. And lastly, but most importantly, look to take care of yourself. This is a very turbulent times we are in, and it's very critical that we look to take care of ourselves during this time. So if you need water, you need to use the bathroom, feel free. This is a space that we want to welcome, we want to grow together, but also look after each other in this space. So I think that's it for my micro asks. I'm looking at you, Saida. If there's anything I missed, please let me know. But I want to welcome Saida into the space. I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Saxon. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're excited to share this with you. My name is Saida Parks. I'm Associate Research Director at Research for Action, or RFA. So I just want to tell you a little bit about RFA and about us and who we are and the work that we do before we jump into our agenda. So RFA is a nonprofit education research organization. We're committed to generating actionable research designed to lead to change in service of a racially and socially just education system. So we're based in Philly, if you didn't catch on to that yet. So we conduct research locally in Philly, but also beyond. We have some national projects as well. At RFA, one of our major focuses is community engaged research and participatory research. So we're building a portfolio of research projects that are community engaged, meaning that we engage community members, collaborate with community members, and seek their input at different phases of our research projects to ensure that our research is relevant and useful to the individuals and the communities who are most impacted. And then we're also building a portfolio of participatory action research projects. Saying participatory takes a lot of work, so we like to call it PAR. And Vicki and Andrea, our hosts, will be talking more about PAR a little bit later. So for now, I just want to mention, I just want to name that this approach is really important to us because it positions community members as collaborators and decision makers throughout the entire research process. And we believe that that actually produces more relevant and accurate research. So in our project so far, we've explored Black teachers' experiences and issues of retention. So in those projects, we work alongside Black teachers to center their lived experiences and their perspectives and allow those to inform the research, which again, we think leads to findings that have the potential to help improve their experiences, lead to change and increase retention. And then the research that we'll be talking about today also fits into a portfolio or a body of work we have on teacher diversity at RFA. So this the research project that this podcast grew out of is part of that growing portfolio. And specifically within that, we have a focus on the attrition and retention of Black teachers. So with our participatory action research, we're actually currently working towards recruiting the next cohort of teacher researchers, and that's going to continue to build on this portfolio. So I see all of you are still introducing yourselves in the chat. Please continue to do that. It's great to meet you. And I want to introduce you to our team. So in terms of our research team at RFA, we have Liana Cabral. You'll be hearing from her tonight. Myself, Kevin Burgess, and Alita Robinson are also on the call with us. And then we received support from Saxon, who you've already met, and also DeQuendra Bertrand, who's our Director of Strategic Communications. I think we also have some teacher researchers from our pilot and cohort 1. So shout out to those of you who are here with us tonight. And then with that, I'd like to actually start talking about the podcast. Let's get into the reason that we're here tonight. So I'd like to introduce you to our podcast team. First, I want to introduce you to Quinn Van and Mignon Combs, who are the hosts of the Diseducation podcast. And for this podcast that we're releasing tonight, they were the producers and the co-writers. And then finally, I'd like to introduce our podcast hosts, Vicki and Andrea. They were part of our pilot cohort for our PAR study. And I just want to read their bios so you can get to know them a little bit. So Vicki Green has been an English teacher for 27 years at Cass Technical High School in Detroit. She's a lifelong proud Detroiter and a proud mother of 2 grown children. Vicki's also a children's book author with several books in a series to be released soon, and I hope at some point she'll say more about that tonight. And then Andrea Barnes. Andrea graduated from Philadelphia's public high school system. She attended John Bartram School for Human Services. She's an alum of Temple and Lincoln University. She's also a mother of three. She teaches high school social studies for the School District of Philadelphia. She's the school-based teacher leader for social studies. She's a Limbach award-winning teacher, and she's an affinity group facilitator with Teach Plus. So with that, I will pass it to Vicki and Andrea.
Hello, everyone. So I'm going to give you a really quick overview of what we did 2 summers ago, or not last summer. Last summer, we worked on the podcast. The summer before, we did the research. So PAR stands for Participatory Action Research. This is a type of research process that prioritizes relationships and communities because it requires participation and action from community members who are being impacted. This means that as Black educators tapped to conduct research, me, Vicki, and the rest of our teacher research team collaborated with RFA on everything from building research questions, conducting the interviews, analysis of data, and informing the recommendations.
Thank you, Andrea. Through that collaborative process, RFA and teacher researchers developed 2 central research questions. How do Black educators in Philly and Detroit understand their role and their unique contributions to the teaching profession now and in the past? And how are Black educators, veteran and new, in Philly and Detroit making sense of the current state of the teaching profession? Our team interviewed Black teachers and students from public and charter school districts across Philly and Detroit. Having teachers as researchers on a project about education is important because we have an understanding of what everybody is going through. That means that as teacher researchers, we can get to the heart of what is at stake and get at the soul of what teachers are experiencing and what they want to see happen.
In order to share our research findings, RFA partnered with Mignon Combs and Quinn Van of This Education to develop and produce this series. In our first episode, We Real Cool, We Teach School, we, Vicki and I, will be talking with other educators, we'll be talking about how Black teachers matter and why.
So tell everybody why a podcast limited series. Why would we do it like that?
We wanted to share our research in a podcast because it's more accessible. We want all types of stakeholders to engage with our researchers, including teachers, families, communities, school leaders, district leaders, policymakers, etc. A podcast allowed us to literally share teachers' voices verbatim in their own words. Quinn and Mignon, can y'all explain what the process was in creating this podcast?
Absolutely. Thank you for setting me up here, Andrea. I just want to shout out and say Miss Andrea and Miss Vicki were powerhouses in this project. It was such an incredible experience to work with them and to engage with this body of research that the RFA team and their team of teacher researchers produced. So for Quinn and I, our role was to come in as producers, essentially kind of project managing. We were the podcast consultants who facilitated workshop sessions. We shared resources that we'd created and best practices on podcasting. And we asked a lot of guiding questions through the process. But ultimately, Miss Andrea and Miss Vicki were the decision makers, right? It was their ideas and their vision that guided the project. And ultimately, they were also writers and hosts of this project, on-air hosts. So Quinn and I, we spent a lot of time on team formation, really getting to know one another on the team, both on the RFA side and then the RFA teacher researcher side. We supported in creating a timeline for us to follow because, we're all teachers. You guys can see I'm joining you from my classroom here in Oakland, California. And so we wanted to make sure we were done with the live portion by the end of the summer. We worked a lot with Ms. Andrea and Ms. Vicki on thinking about the audience and purpose of this project, because the body of research existed through the work that RFA did. And so thinking about the podcast as a piece of that, but separate from the doing of the research, we wanted to think about who is the center. Quinn and I call it, who's the North Star, which we thought was appropriate given this look at Black teachers. And ultimately what Ms. Andrea and Ms. Vicki see is that centering students and centering teachers, and in particular Black students and Black teachers, truly is the North Star, is that guiding point for the work that's being done. And so that was a kind of our guidepost as we worked together. Quinn and I also spent a lot of time developing workshops on writing and idea development. We worked with Ms. Andrea and Ms. Vicky to review data from the research study, which was an incredible amount of data and incredible stories from teachers in Philadelphia and in Detroit. And we worked to tag and categorize specifically for use in the podcast project, as opposed to the research in totality. We helped in hunting down people for permissions to use their interviews. Quinn and I worked on making sure audio clips were usable for an audio project, and we worked with Andrea and Vicky on outlining and scripting. Over the course of this project, we thought a lot about kind of the final piece, right? Which is where is this project going, right? And what does it mean to create something that is meaningful for our audience and for our center, those Black teachers and Black students. And so through all of the outlining and the scripting and thinking about best recording practices and all of that, the center for us was, how can we make content that takes this important research and makes it accessible, not just in format and ability to access it, but accessible in terms of interest for this audience that we all care so deeply about as people who care about educators and who care about Black teachers and young people. On the tail end, once it was recorded, Quinn and I did a lot of work on sound editing and creating the soundscape for this project, and a huge shout out to the sound engineer that we worked with, Anthony Hernandez. But that was ultimately our roles, just working as podcast consultants to help bring this vision to life.
Yeah, and I just want to add on that, in terms of overview of, the final dissemination, we ultimately settled on essentially 3 episodes. It just seemed like, based on on our outlining process, there was this really clear pattern of why not do a 1, 2, 3 kind of Pete, where episode 1, which we titled Be Real Cool, focuses on the reasons why, Black teachers matter, the contributions that they bring, and why they are so important and meaningful to the teaching profession. It really explores how Black teachers humanize all students, how they are continuing the legacy and work of advancing equity and progress in this nation and country, and that they, because of their background and their identity, are able to come in and teach truth in classrooms. So that in many ways summarizes our first episode, We Real Cool. Our second episode is titled We Wear the Mask, which explores more, the challenges that Black teachers experience while working in the classroom. A lot of the episode talks about, what do Black teachers don't get? What is there a lack of? We explore a variety of things, but it includes lack of support from Black students and the trauma of witnessing that, what it means to lack support for teacher training, lack of effective leadership from administration, and more. And then our final episode, A Seat at the Table, is centered around the recommendations, many of which, are this is all coming from the qualitative research. So while there's a lot of voices, and we tried to encourage Ms. Vicky, Andrea, to bring in some of their personal experiences, which is the interesting part about doing a participatory action research, is that, those doing research have their personal experience as well. And so the podcast allows them to bring a little bit of that in, but ultimately the podcast is really centered on, what's showing up in these qualitative interviews, what's showing up in the research itself. And so these recommendations directly stem from that. And, it covers recruitment, as well as really covering for retention to happen. Teachers need that seat at the table. Teachers need to be empowered. They need to be given, particularly Black teachers, agency, and to feel like they're not just giving input, but actually are decision makers at the table themselves. And yeah, that's our overview of the 3 episodes. And if it's not clear from the titles, this is just a whole group of nerdy English teachers with our nerdy literary illusions. But otherwise, I want to give it back to Andrea and Ms. Vicky, who are now going to lead us into highlighting some of the snippets and dialogue, and some of the best parts of our episodes.
Thank you, Quinn and Mignon. So we're going to get into what you all came for. listening to excerpts and parts of our podcast. We'll be listening to some selected clips together, but we encourage you all to listen to each episode in full. We will have a Q&A after hearing all of the clips. And so right now we're going to take a part and listen to episode 1, or clips of episode 1. We hear directly from Black teachers about their contributions to the field. And the reason is so important to ensure we have Black teachers in our classrooms.
This is a pattern that comes up again and again in the research we conducted. What Black teachers do that is unique is build deep relationships.
So many teachers we interviewed talked about their rapport, the connections they have with Black students. Like we said earlier, seeing the whole child. Humanizing Black students is part of building these strong relationships and showing kids that we're invested in them, that we're invested in their futures.
In this research project, many interview subjects, both the teachers and the students, talk about how important it is for them to see Black teachers and the incredible impact those teachers have on them.
So my 8th grade, well, she wasn't my 8th grade, but she was my middle school art teacher. She just really made me feel like I could be anything. Like, I thought she was this really great Black woman that just like handled everything so great and just always seemed to know exactly what to do. And I wanted to be just like her. And then my high school world history teacher, he put a lot of things into perspective for me. And like gave me a lot of life lessons that I appreciated. And I just remember when I got older and I was going to college, thinking about what I wanted to do, I always knew that I wanted to do something that was impactful, that helped people, maybe not on like a grand scale and have a name for myself, but I just wanted to be someone that could help people. And honestly, the reason that I really got into teaching, aside from loving kids, was those 2 teachers, because they left like such a dent in my life and such an impact on my life. I wanted to be that person for somebody else.
Our PAR research shows that Black teachers see education as a continuing legacy. We are building on the work of those in our past, people like Du Bois and Washington and Bethune, and so many others whose names we don't even know. Teachers we interviewed see education as the way out, the way up, the way to be able to make a meaningful life, the way to liberation and freedom. One teacher the team interviewed says this:
the profession of education for a Black educator is so intertwined with historical progress that it's more an act of social justice than it is something that garners you a check. In that sense, it's something sacred. It's something that you just don't take lightly. And when Black educators are emboldened and passionate about what they do, to the extent that they may even be enraged, you have to understand that it's personal, that what Black educators are fighting for is deeper than a job. You know, it's deeper than that.
Liberation work is not new, but it is necessary still today. In the words of another teacher we interviewed, Black teachers are building upon the greatness of ancestors to remind them that you're not the first. I'm not the first. We've been doing this. Black excellence, Black culture, Black ingenuity. We have something to contribute. We've been contributing. Black teachers matter because we're not intimidated by teaching the truth about the history in America. We include the voices of the unheard to make sure that they will be prepared for the world they live in. And Black teachers do this every day. A teacher you heard earlier in this episode talked about how she teaches truth in her curriculum. The teacher talks about why teaching truth is central to her pedagogy.
I always do a unit on intersectionality, and that is so much fun because we go over social identities. We do like a social identity wheel where it's like, let's explore like what your ethnicity means to you, what age in your experience feels like for you, what your financial situation looks like, right? We also look at systems of power, systems of oppression, identity dichotomies, like we do all of that. And then we also are constantly looking at the lived experiences of other people, right? Because, you know, you might be in a classroom with like visibly homogenous like identities, right? But if you have a whole room of like Black and brown kids, you might have a couple kids who are undocumented, you might have a couple kids who are disabled, have a couple kids that are queer, but you don't see that. And so it's really great for them to see these different lived experiences through, you know, videos, podcasts, documentaries, movies, whatever. So to bring those identities and experiences to light is really exciting, because then you start seeing kids be like, well, I do start to notice that maybe like if our elevator at school keeps breaking, then our kids who are disabled can't get to class on time, right?
All right. So teaching as sacred, what a powerful point. And of course, liberation work remaining important even today. It remains important even today, especially it rings true now, and how teaching the truth and teaching about racial justice is under attack. Teaching the truth is central to the pedagogy of Black teachers and always has been. Now we'll hear a little from the second episode. Teachers named a long list of challenges they've been facing, and we think it's important to highlight these so that the reality of Black teachers' experiences are not swept under the rug.
One teacher discusses watching the turnover rate at his school and its linked to teacher status, saying this.
In shambles. I would say every year the turnover rate is crazy. Even at my school in general, I've seen some people that's been there since I've been there, but it's always people coming and going. And I know that some people actually have left the profession because they think it's just underappreciated, underpaid, undervalued, to be honest. And I mean, I see it to an extent too.
Despite that tenor of public discourse, Black teachers still manage to love teaching and the kids. But the conditions of teaching often means that the love of students and the commitment to Black kids leads to Black teachers burning out. We're not able to do what we do because of the system. We're able to do what we do in spite of it. One teacher speaks of the pure exhaustion that Black teachers feel.
I feel like teachers are tired. Teachers are tired. I feel like teachers innately want what's best for all students, but I feel like they are finding it difficult to provide that because they're not set up in equitable situations. You know, I feel like there's a lot of demands put on teachers, but oftentimes I feel like we're set up to fail. Whether it be lack of supplies, lack of curriculum, lack of support.
Lack of resources to support their students, lack of quality teacher education, lack of support from admin, lack of autonomy in the classroom, and lack of respect for the profession. All this leaves Black teachers wiped out. One teacher talks about how this can make Black teachers consider other options.
Lack of support, a whole lot of work for not a whole lot of money. You could go into other professions where you don't need, so many advanced degrees and have so much debt to pay back and make a substantial amount of money. I feel like the pandemic kind of showed people, I have other options. I could do different things. So a lot of people left because they were doing something that they realized they had other things they could pursue, like they had other gifts and talents. And then when you don't necessarily feel appreciated because of the way the shift is with the system, teachers don't get the sort of respect that they really deserve working with people's shoulders.
I love to teach and I love my students. What I did not like is the system.
We're tired and we're stressed out, and we are honestly trying our best. Like, teachers are doing the best they can with what they are given. And I think a lot of times people think teachers are miracle workers, and they are not. They are people. And they try to do the most that they can with very little resources.
The challenges facing Black teachers are not insurmountable if we recognize in our society how imperative Black teachers are to the advancement of not just Black students, but of society as a whole. All children need Black teachers.
Based on our research and our lived experiences, we understand how Black teachers love teaching their kids, but all too often feel unrecognized, unappreciated, and disrespected. As we heard, teachers are tired and stressed out, and right now, that will only get worse. If you're a Black teacher here, please drop in the chat how you are or plan to protect your peace and preserve your energy to show up for your students. Now, we're going to hear a few snippets from the final episode. While you're listening, we encourage you to think about your own school or district context. Who makes decisions about policy and practice? What is it like for Black teachers to work there?
This part research also reveals Black teachers' desire for more effective and quality DEI professional development, not just for them, but especially for their colleagues. This is necessary for building and maintaining a school and work culture that sustains Black teachers.
I don't want to be cheesy and say about having more DEI PDs because I think they only do so much. But how can we actually make diversity, equity, and inclusion something that is literally like structured here and normalized to everybody that work in the institution? We all need those skills. Everybody needs to be constantly building like a cultural competence.
Quality DEI PDs can look like teachers leading instead of outside consultants. We've started to see that a bit in Philly and Detroit.
Because the alternative are PDs like one I had to attend, where this white lady consultant had us walk in circles and talk to the person in front of us, which she said was a strategy that, quotes, even people of rival gangs might find they actually have things in common. Like West Side Story.
Oh, no, she didn't.
She assumed that a Black student population equated to gang affiliation. What this shows is that PDs are often being outsourced and delivered by people without any real expertise or understanding of what works in a classroom.
PDs should be led by teachers because we're the ones with the expertise and classroom experience and who actually know what we and students need. What else do you think DEI PDs need to be more effective?
DEI PDs need to be mandatory because a huge part of teaching is responding to the whole child. That includes the many aspects of identity that impact who kids are, how kids enter space, how the education system and the individuals working in it respond to them. And we know that many Black teachers are doing this, but other people see this work as optional. It needs to be mandatory.
DEI PDs should focus not only on student interactions, but also on how teachers interact with one another. An anti-racist workplace environment is crucial for supporting and retaining Black teachers. If we want to keep Black teachers or attract new ones, we need effective and tangible support from school leadership. Time and time again, the teachers we interviewed talked about how education suffers when educators aren't given decision-making power. Several teachers described how unreasonable it is for teachers to have so little power and influence when they are the ones in the classroom doing the work and seeing what works.
Understand the viewpoint of the teacher being in the classroom. I got a lot of pushback personally from my admin, so they were kind of giving me the whole flack of, well, you don't know, this, that, and the third. I am also the only person that's in the classroom every day, 5 days a week, 6 hours a day. I am spending the most time with these kids. So if I'm telling you I'm noticing a pattern, if I'm telling you something's difficult, then that's not, it's not a lie. It's not to get out of the doing the work, or it's not, to make things easier for me, because in all actuality, it won't make things easier for me, because now I have to go back to the drawing board and try to do it again.
They see an alternative, letting Black teachers decide what schools should look like and sound like, including leadership and curriculum. In the words of one teacher, let us have a seat at the table in larger ways and more seats at more tables. Education is a big business and we deserve a place in it. This research reveals Black teachers don't want to just offer input or have their voices heard. Black teachers want real power over the decisions made.
When asked what specific areas Black teachers want more decision-making agency in, Black teachers in Philadelphia and Detroit named curriculum design, hiring, and policy. When it comes to curriculum, Black teachers want to see less testing. One teacher notes that we have to stop putting so much power into standardized tests.
Black teachers we interviewed also state they want to see curriculum that actually teaches skills their kids need in the real world. An example of lack of agency over curriculum is when an English language arts teacher we interviewed talks about how they don't have agency over choice of text or pacing. They say, I think the curriculum is stifling. I think it strangles us. We had 4 novels that we had to teach last year. I saw the reason why. I understood that, but it was like you were on this pace and you couldn't delineate from the pace no matter what.
On the flip side, when Black teachers have autonomy and agency over the curriculum, they are better able to support their students. One teacher describes this saying, I feel like some of the choices that were made by the leadership team in terms of books that were being read just didn't work for the group of students I was with, and they gave me autonomy to change. They gave me the autonomy to do what's best for the kids that I was serving. Black teachers having autonomy over curriculum design is a way to empower Black teachers with freedom in the classroom. It demonstrates trust and belief in the abilities and expertise of Black teachers, and it ensures that the experts in the room have the flexibility to respond to the needs of individual students. Our study's recommendations for Black teachers are critical, because while all teachers need them, the consequences of their absence are more severe for Black teachers.
What this means is that improving the conditions for Black teachers improves the condition for all teachers and serves all students.
We know that losing Black teachers is a problem, and oftentimes the first thing decision makers look at is recruitment. But we are bringing Black teachers into a burning building.
Not only is that unethical, it's unsustainable.
Doing the hard work of building a more welcoming and empowering environment for Black teachers is what will ultimately attract, recruit, and retain Black teachers in the profession.
People are constantly making decisions for a school or for the kids, but you're not getting teacher input. So you have all of these focus groups, you have these third parties that come in, the consulting agencies. You're going to do this curriculum, you're going to change this schedule, but no one's ever asked a teacher what's in the best interest, and we're the ones on the front line every day. And so maybe if you get teacher input, like the fact that they change curriculum every year to me is mind-boggling. These kids are never going to make gains if you're changing curriculum year after year. So a teacher will never get to fully grasp how to master content and really tailor it to that specific child if we talk about kids with special needs. But if you ask a teacher, maybe they'll tell you, like, this is what we need to do and we need to try it out for 5. Like, just get input from the teachers, because we're the ones that have to do it. And I think if they were actually concerned more about teachers, the thought process, including us in anything, you might have less turnover. At the end of the day, they look at us like we are all replaceable. We are robots. You want to go, bye. But then you're so desperate for people. You need people, but you don't value us. So I think finding or figuring out a way to value your staff, your employees, I think that goes a long way with retention.
There we go. All right, now we would love to hear from you all. What resonated with you? What bubbled up for you in hearing these clips? What questions do you have for us?
Thank you so much, y'all. So amazing. Let's give some love to them in the chat through emojis. Incredible work. So yes, it's our Q&A period. Saida and I are going to field the questions to Ms. Vicky, Andrea, Mignon, and Quinn. You can use the raised hand icon and come off mute to ask a question, or you can drop it in the chat. I see we already have one in the chat, so we can begin with that one while folks are thinking. But yeah, if you raise your hand, I'll keep track of the order in which people raise their hands. So yeah, Saida, did you want to read the first one in the chat?
Yeah, so we have a question in the chat already from Dawn. Thank you. It says, how do you respond to Trump's dismantling DEI initiatives? So I'm not sure if this is how you meant it, Dawn. You can let us know in the chat, but I'm kind of reading that as in terms of talking to students about it. So I'm curious, Vicky and Andrea, and Mignon, you're still in the classroom. What has that looked like for you?
I think for me, I use I constantly remind students of how DEI includes everybody. So my school is predominantly African American, which it is a clear attack on people of color. But everything that benefits people of color benefits everybody. So I remind people that by attacking DEI, he's attacking women. He's attacking women of all races. He's attacking people with disabilities, especially those that have intersectionality, whereas I'm Black, I'm gay, I'm a woman, like all of those things are being attacked right now. And so I want them to understand that whatever happens for a group of people happens and it improves the lives of everybody. And so for these things to be attacked, mean that we're going to see less women in the workforce. We're going to see fewer LGBTQ people. There will also be less protections for us, so that I make them know, like, yeah, you've got to move through this world very carefully, but even more so now, because now we're not going to be protected people. Ooh, sorry.
I'll add to that. This is something that I think about a lot. As I said, I do this work on podcasting, but I'm also a current classroom educator. And one of the things that I'm often reminded of as a classroom teacher is, we get initiatives all the time that are the same thing that we did last year with a new name. Deliver the clever paragraph and then deliver the CER paragraph and then right. And so it's the same thing. It's the same content, but with a new name. And I think there's a lesson in there for us that we don't have to call things DEI to do the work that we know is necessary to build a world for our students and to help them be prepared to be successful in the world that exists right now. And the other thing that comes to mind quite often, over the last several months, several years, and certainly in 2025 is, what Representative John Lewis often talked about, getting in good trouble. I'm not the first to say it. I certainly won't be the last, but slavery was legal and segregation was legal. And, all of those things around the world that we have seen happen have often been legal. And that there is a point in time where we have to make ethical decisions, right, as opposed to legal decisions. And so that's my personal kind of, as Mignon, that is my view and how I attempt to move through the world.
Awesome. I see a hand raised. Ibiduni, would you like to come off mute and maybe let me. Are you able to come off mute yourself? Okay.
Hello?
Hello.
Okay, perfect. Okay, well, and good afternoon, or wherever it may be. My name is Ibiduni, and so what I do here is, 1 second, sorry. So I'm an intern ASL teacher currently. It's temporary, but okay, sorry, that's the interpreter. So in terms of this, 1 second, please.
Okay, go ahead. Yes. As I was saying, sorry about that. We had a little bit of an interpreter snafu. So anyway, so first of all, first things first, I'm an internant ASL teacher. So I teach American Sign Language in the schools, and the school that I teach in is a district of Philadelphia, Philadelphia as so PSD. And so anyway, the IDI, so to have that inclusion, it has really changed. And we're not really using DEI. We have created something more as a Black group of people. We don't necessarily like DEI as that word. We've changed the wording. We've created, and we're discussing about cultural positive. Instead of DEI, we're discussing a culture positive wording. So just putting that out there instead of using DEI. And that's it.
Hello? Thank you. Do any of our teacher researchers or podcasters want to just respond to using more like
you're welcome
broader language than DEI? I think in some ways we talked about that during the script, right? Remember there was like some back and forth about what language to use, and you all settled on that because it was like recognizable to a lot of people. But go ahead.
A little like clarity around like the process of it, because we actually had a lot of discussions about what term to use. But if you listen to the podcast, you can hear that we used a snippet from an interview. And so the term DEI wasn't actually used by our team, but by one of the teachers that was being interviewed by one of the research subjects. And so in talking about, right, what was uncovered in the research, we use the term DEI. And I also think we use the term DEI because when you are a teacher in the classroom, and while I'm out of the classroom now, I did teach for a while, the term everybody uses for all of these professional developments is just DEI. And so it's recognizable and it's what's used, even if I think as a team, we have our own qualms around it. And our own qualms, not just around the terminology, but like as an industry, right? There's an emptiness and a hollowness that can come with DEI work. It's very superficial. It's greenwashing in many ways. But at the end of the day, no matter the name, the essence, liberation work, it goes by many names, anti-oppressive work, etc. This is the type of work and the type of thing we're talking about. But we recognize that this is not, this is an empty term in many ways. But just wanting to give some insight as to why this term is used.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
But I do want to thank you for bringing this up and just like, having this as part of the Q&A and discussion, because that actually was like something that we talked about a lot and we're really unsure about what to use, but because it's what was being, this is the term that those were being interviewed brought up, we decided to go with it just for clarity.
And also, And also one of the reasons why I'm kind of reluctant about DEI is the word itself could be replaced and we could put in some new words that would be a nicer feel, more positive, more strong wording than DEI. DEI is, I understand, but we as Black people can collaborate. We could come together and we could put out some different words that mean the same thing as DEI, but something that we can use for the future. Right now, today, this year, there's been a huge change. And so I think it's time for us to put DEI aside and come together and be creative with the words that we use for this. And in the future, I think we'll be successful at the right time. So I'm looking forward to that.
Can you guys hear me? So I
Yes, I can hear you.
so I have a problem with the idea that we need to put aside DEI. We are allowing somebody else to set our own narrative. The truth is, what is not positive about diversity, equity, and inclusion? What is not positive about it is that those people have turned it into something derogatory. It's not. What is negative about that except the connotation that they've decided to put on it? So I don't think we need to change the term. I think we need to steal back our narrative as to what it's about.
Yeah, I think there's actually like more agreement there than what we're thinking. I think Ibudini was calling on us to use even stronger words than DEI and how it can often be empty and misused. But also, I think the resistance against even something as basic as DEI, right, is troubling, because we know that it's not as strong as justice and liberation and all of the other words that we could come together and create. So I think you're both calling that, like, we need to be collaborating and working together to continue to fight for justice and for our schools, our students, our teachers. I know that we have another question in the chat. Saida, I'll pass it to you to raise that one.
Yeah, we have a question from David. Hi, David. Shout out to David. He also works with us at RFA. So I'll voice your question, but if there's anything you want to add or clarify, definitely let us know. So David said, I was so compelled by the teacher who was granted autonomy and trust to revise their curriculum to best serve their students. I'd love to hear reflections on how to create the circumstances that would expand that kind of autonomy and trust, which I imagine would improve retention. So any thoughts on how to expand that kind of autonomy and trust that the teacher was talking about in the clip?
So is he talking about the teacher that did the intersectionality work?
Believe so. I can't see you, David, but if you
I think that's who he's talking about, the teacher's quote that did yep. Okay, so that teacher works at my school, so that's how I can answer the question. Cass Tech is a school of choice. It's a test-in school, and as a result, we have, because we're a school of choice, we automatically have more autonomy than a lot of the neighborhood schools. So that's where that freedom is coming from, the fact that we are allowed to do so because of the kind of school that we are.
I'd love to add to this. Vicky's right on the money in terms of like school can help facilitate. Some of what came up as Ms. Andrea, Ms. Vicky, and I were exploring the research that they and the RFA teacher researcher team did were a couple of themes for Black teachers around how they built the kind of multi-directional trust that between them and students, And a lot of that was around humanizing young people, and in particular, young Black students, and teaching truth. And now that was like for those relationships with students. In terms of the kind of autonomy and trust that Black teachers need in order to, be retained, to stay in the profession, right? A lot of that comes up in the later episodes of this limited podcast series, and where Andrea and Vicky are really discussing the difference between being kind of isolated and left floating in the wind by yourself and being trusted to do what you are an expert in. And that so much of that comes down to support from administrators and from school systems. And so that's definitely a question that the podcast explores in more detail. So listen to those later episodes.
Yes, a plug to listen to the full episodes. Thank you. Okay, we also have another question from Andrea. Thank you. Not Andrea Barnes. I think we have multiple Andreas. I'd love to hear from the teacher researchers about how this experience of PAR impacted their perception of themselves as teachers and their commitment to education.
I would love to answer this. So it was absolutely both sad and affirming at the same time, because often teaching, it's just you in your classroom and maybe the few teachers that you talk to, and you don't even realize or necessarily know that we are universally experiencing the same kinds of things, that it's not just us, it's not just our schools, not just our district, but there's something that transcends that the area and everything else. It's like, after listening to the some of the videos and the audio rather, I couldn't tell if a teacher was from Philly or Detroit because they were saying the same thing. So that was important. It was important to be affirmed that this not just me. That's one thing. And the other aspect is the idea that this is sad. That this is sad, that this is the way that it is everywhere. So it's, it's mixed emotions there about it.
And I would agree. And I think how it affected me individually, it was that reminder of why I need to stay in education. And I think with the same with everybody that we interviewed, as tough as the situation was, luckily everyone we interviewed did not want to leave the field of education. Now, some of them wanted to, and some of them have advanced to higher positions, becoming assistant principals, taking leadership positions so that they could help to form the school that they want and that they want to see. Which still, even in admin, you are in confines and you don't really have that freedom to really create what you want. But it was affirming to talk to everyone and still see and know that we all realized that we were needed. Though it was crazy, the struggle is real. All the problems that we saw in Philly were happening in Detroit as well. And what we were dealing with, and knowing that there was a circle of people who understood this. And if you listen to the full series, you hear it over and over again. They still come to work every day. So these are the teachers who aren't leaving the profession. They're going to, and we had a range of educators as well. We had some brand new to the profession. As you know, it's generally within the first 3 to 5 years that people leave the profession, if they're going to leave it. And then we had lifers like Miss Vicky in there for 27 years. And that everyone felt this strong conviction, no matter what we were going through, that we were here for our children. And that was enlightening. So when you have those weekdays, those days that you just like, why am I here? I might have to find a new, somebody out there making way more than me, doing way less. You remember why I'm here. I'm here for these children. I'm here to educate them. I'm here to make their lives better. And we still find joy. We still find fun through all of what we're going through.
Thank you, Andrea. I wanted to also just call out that we have 2 other teacher researchers in the audience. I mean, more, but 2 that are on video, so I feel like comfortable calling them out. Courtney and Reed, thanks for coming. I don't know if you guys want to come off chat and answer that question too. Just I'll say it again. Andrea was interested in hearing about how the experience of PAR impacted your perception of yourselves as teachers and your commitment to education. No pressure, but feel free.
I'll just say quick. Oh, rock, paper, scissors. Rock, paper, scissors. No, I'll just say real quickly, like I felt the legacy of educators of the past. So even though we're interviewing current educators, I felt the connection to the legacy of educators that preceded us. Like we're standing on the shoulders of those. And for those of you who read Kamika Royal's book about Philly and that trajectory of Black educators in the field, like we're still showing up. And that was the thing that was like reaffirming for me, the resilience of us still showing up despite all the, like the playbook and the same systems are still going on like 70 years, 50, 60, 70 years ago, and it's still going on, but we're still showing up. Although we're disappearing, not bit by bit, we're disappearing a lot. And that is worrying to Vicky's point. Like, so it's scary, but the fact that the ones that are still showing up, we're still carrying the legacy.
Definitely agree with all that's been shared already. To me, it was a big grounding. I am a newer person or a newer teacher. This is only my third year. And so when I came in, we were just really getting off of the pandemic. School had just started to seem normal. And then we found ourselves in this really camaraderie space of not just holding each other up, but really doing this work about looking at what are the experiences that people are having, what's bringing these people here, what's causing them to leave, and where is this soft landing space for joy in education as it relates to Black teachers. It was a really good community, one of which like we still talk today, many of us, and I'll see Miss Green and Miss Shar often. But yeah, definitely. And you all are always and so appreciated.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions in the chat or any hands raised. Oh, here we go. There you go.
Oh, from Kate. Hi, Kate. I'm sorry. She's our executive director at Research for Action. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for your question. For the PAR teacher researchers, what assumptions or biases do you think non-teacher researchers bring that get in the way of them understanding? So what are the biases or assumptions? Yeah, you understand.
I guess I have to say understanding what, like
I think of understanding the research.
profession.
Is that what you mean, Kate?
Yeah, I wanted to respond, and it's not just like non-teachers, but just even sometimes educators, where the framing, and we spend a lot of time talking about framing as we were developing our research process, but the asset framing is often missing in the non-researchers, but also even some educators. Like, so just asset framing, if you bring it like our kids, our teachers, they're bringing asset orientation versus deficit orientation. I think that would change. That would be a big game changer. And we spend a lot of time even interrogating our own biases, because we bring the same biases that non-researchers bring into the profession. As my wife plays with my head. Sorry about that. Love you, baby. Y'all saw that?
Vicky, were you going to add something?
I think that excuse me. It's difficult because people have been to school, they think they understand what it's like to be a teacher. And I often equate it to, well, I've had surgery, let me operate on you. So having participated in something on some level doesn't mean that you really completely understand every aspect of what goes on in that thing. So the assumptions and biases non-teacher researchers have that get in the way of them understanding is probably just what we do on a day-to-day basis regularly, like what we have to deal with and contend with. It there's not even something that we necessarily complain about. How a lot of time could be spent on a teachable moment that you have to sidetrack half the class for, and now you're off track from what you've scheduled to make happen, and testing and fire drills, and this happens and that happens, and so therefore we're always teachers make more decisions during the day than most people make at the spur of the moment because of what's happening. I think that not completely understanding what we actually deal with stops people from relating to and really understanding. I know I felt like I was doing a whole bunch of nodding here in this meeting and when I was talking to the teachers. So I really related, and it helped me to even know what other questions or follow-up questions to ask them. So yeah, I just think people not understanding what we do regularly on a daily basis would keep them from understanding the complexity of the issues that we have.
Yeah, and I'm agree with Vicky. I think a lot of people can say that, all right, there's a lot of jobs out here that is hard. But I think one thing that people forget about is how valuable an educator is in general. The fact that you wouldn't have any other jobs if you didn't have someone to educate the children in the first place. And I think the biases that a researcher would have, they would look at it like, okay, you're a teacher, but a construction worker is hard too. So what's the big difference? Without really understanding what it's like to manage and be around 33 different personalities, 33 different learning styles, and figuring a way to reach each one of those persons or people or children or wonderful children so that they are successful, because that's our goal. It's more than just let me teach you how to read this book, but you need to be successful in life. A construction worker doesn't have that level of stress. And it may sound odd, but oddly enough, as stressful as being a doctor or a surgeon is, and some of us can even attest to it, some of them are not necessarily there for the person or the personality. They're dealing with the medical side, and a lot of us, and really think about how unpersonable many of our doctors have been in the past. Like, I have a very strict way of picking a doctor, because they don't always listen to us, or they don't always, but as an educator, you feel like I can't not listen to my children, because that could be, even though a doctor not listening is also very damaging, but they still don't listen to us. It's just like a very different experience in understanding how and why someone would choose that profession or leave the profession. Because we're in those, as their researchers, we're in the same seat as them. There's a reason why we chose the profession, and it's invigorating to hear other people's reasons. There's a reason why we chose to stay. And then those reasons why they're thinking about leaving, we've had those same reasons. It's just that even though we were like, oh my gosh, I wanted to leave. We didn't say it like that in the research, but as they were writing, those thoughts were in our head. I was thinking of the same thing, but when we still chose to stay. And I think someone outside of the profession wouldn't understand those nuances of what it really means to be a teacher, what the profession entails, how important the profession is, even though there's many other jobs that are important, but you don't see people leaving those professions like you see people leaving education.
Really quick, of the many important things that were just said, I want to highlight one thing Andrea just mentioned. In thinking about her role as a researcher, I just want to talk a bit about this project. So, we come with all of our opinions about education, but one of the special things about this podcast is that this podcast was not about our opinions, mine or Quinn as consultants, or even really Miss Andrea or Miss Vicky. It was really special because it was to lift up the research that RFA did. So the ideas that show up in this podcast, when you listen to these 3 episodes, while they're informed by all of our humanness, right, these are actually coming directly from this really really incredible research that RFA produced. And so because of that, right, there are areas where I may wax poetic about it, right, in my personal life, that wouldn't necessarily, or Miss Andrea and Miss Vicky would, that may not necessarily show up in the podcast, because this is doing the work of making this important research that RFA has done accessible to the public, not necessarily sharing our personal opinions about what is happening in education and with Black teachers.
Yeah, thank you all. There is another question in the chat. I think we're getting close to time, so I'm not sure if this might be our last question. But Angela says I think someone's responding to you in the chat, Angela. I was actually going to read Kaylin's. I agree with standardized testing being problematic and not an accurate measurement of a child's knowledge or understanding of the material. So what is the proposed alternative? So Vicky or Andrea or Mignon or Quinn, if you have thoughts on that, but also other teacher researchers, if you have thoughts on alternatives to standardized testing.
So I think you can go about standardized testing in different ways. Like, I'm never going to deny that testing is needed. I mean, for me to even become a teacher, we all had to take like 80 tests to get into our profession. But I think the biggest problem with it is it becomes the only measurement for a child. And I think even though we can have standardized testing, like I go back into my education, there was standardized testing when I was in elementary school. It wasn't the PSSAs or the Keystones like we have in Pennsylvania now, but they did take tests. They gave us back the scores. They explained the scores and what they meant. And we had a better understanding of why we took the test. Right now, the test almost it can make or break, depending on what school a child will end up going to or not being able to go to. But I think the standardized test is only a measurement of one thing for a child. Can you read at grade level? Can you do math at grade level? And it never looks at all the other things that a child can do. And some standardized tests, especially on the high school level, don't even measure or care about growth. And I found that really problematic, that it's either you're proficient or you're not. Not that maybe in ninth grade, I was below basic, 10th grade, I'm basic, and 11, none of that matters. It's either you're proficient or not. And I think that growth is more important for any human. How have I grown? What have I been learning? How has my mind expanded? And also understanding that humans are multifaceted. Um, the same kid who might struggle to read is the same kid who could put a computer together. Something I can't do, but I can read. But I can't do anything with my hands. And I think unfortunately there's no way, or the system hasn't created a way, it doesn't want to create a way to measure all of the things that a child may know. And I'm older, so yeah, I took standardized tests, but it didn't have, other than maybe the SAT, it didn't have the weight that they do now, that it has for a school. And also the standardized tests are so unattached from the children, and a lot of times the kids don't even care about the test. I've seen that if they don't do well enough on that standardized test in 7th grade here in Philadelphia, that means there's a lot of schools closed to them that some of those kids might have worked hard and been successful at if they were given that opportunity, because the standardized test doesn't test if you're a hard worker, if you're going to go above and beyond to make sure you're successful. It just tests you, either checks if you're on reading level or not. And I think when I was younger and we took the tests, they were important, but they weren't the end of the day for us. It didn't completely limit where I could go to school or not. My work habits and my grades are what got me to go to particular schools.
I just want to add on here that once again, really, this is a really interesting question, and I have some thoughts, and so I want to add to them. But once again, they're just my personal thoughts or opinions. The podcast, what explores what people were saying in interviews, such as, let's not keep having to teach to the test. I don't think alternatives were necessarily offered, and so they weren't explored in the podcast. But you're directly asking, what are proposed alternatives? And I actually have I think a different stance from Andrea. Which is that, and this would happen a lot during our writing process. We have different thoughts, and that made working together really fun. I don't believe that standardized testing is necessary, and in the last couple of years, because I would do a lot of, in addition, when I was in the classroom, I was doing a lot of private tutoring for ACT, SAT, et cetera, or helping students get into college, college prep. SAT, ACT has become less of a necessary thing in the last couple of years as well. And so, when I think about my time in the classroom, one of the things I really love is master-based assessments. So if you're a teacher and you're trained to be able to assess students based on observations, there's several different observations you can be doing in real time. Write feedback on written things, but also anytime you have any kind of unit or assignment, there's going to be a rubric. And that rubric, should be master-based. And you should be reviewing with students, where are they in terms of mastering the skills that this particular assignment or this particular unit, all the different assignments for this unit is building the student towards. And so if you're using a master-based assessment as a teacher, you should be able to assess, where are my student skill-wise, mastery-wise, and getting them to the point where they get there. Which is why I'm I don't think you need standardized testing to do that. But what I do think you need is really stringent teacher prep that teaches future prospective teachers master-based assessments in a more uniform fashion, so that more people are using this in the classroom and are adept and skilled at doing so. And then I do think, if there are testing that students need to train themselves for, when I think back, even my own personal history, if you are rigorous in the classroom and getting students to master these skills, they should be able to ace any testing that they take, period. And while there's a little bit of training students how to take tests and a little bit of practice so they get used to multiple choice or et cetera, if they have the skills, they will be able to do it. And when you teach to a test, you are limiting students and what they can actually learn and do versus giving them rigor so that they are expansive. And these tests are something they can breeze by. So that's just my personal opinion.
To jump off of Quinn and Shar Willis Gregory in the chat, who said it feels like they're testing the students to assess the teachers. I am certain I am not the only educator with the experience where I'm in California, so high school students take the CASP. So I know I'm not the only one who's had students take state mandated tests, and then you never ever get any results about it other than the percentage number at the following year. And so when we're thinking about standardized testing that are supposed to be testing students, but often are also assessing teachers, the data from that is actually almost never useful or disaggregated in a way that educators can make use of to create better educational opportunities for students. And so that is one of those kind of sad realities of being in the classroom at districts everywhere. And so it was interesting hearing in the research, teachers talk about kind of their approach, which was never about testing. But in the research, what teachers were talking about was dealing with students as whole humans and supporting their learning in those ways.
Thank you all. Thank you so much for engaging in the Q&A, for our brilliant teacher, researchers, and teachers responding to those questions and sharing their thoughts on their craft. I want to just very briefly respond to Angela's question. I see that Reed did as well, and I was going to partly say that. So in terms of thinking about how we support teachers in states where CRT is especially under attack, our work really centers teachers and all of the process. And so part of what we're doing now with our teachers is meeting and talking about what's coming up in your context. How are you dealing with it, right? We as researchers, we don't have the answers. We can help ask and craft the questions and come together to think about how to respond to them. But we're really leaning on the expertise of Black teachers in dealing with this. And I will just put a plug in that both of our research projects, as you heard at the intro, we've had 2 so far with Black teacher researchers. they talk about this legacy of Black teachers, you know, in fugitive pedagogy. I'll just raise this book real quick right here, by Carter Woodson. It's called Fugitive Pedagogy, and it's just about the ways in which Black teachers over time have been subversive in the classroom and doing what they need to do to serve their students and closing the door anyway. And so that's just something that we've heard beyond this book, just from the teachers that we've interviewed, and it's a practice that we see happening and we know will continue to happen in this context. And we think that Black teachers especially can teach and guide other teachers on how to do this work, because it is a legacy of Black teaching. Because in this country, you know, it was illegal for Black folks to learn to read, right? So we're familiar with this. So anyway, just gonna transition to our closing. Thank you all so much for coming. I'm so just like grateful to be a part of this project with these brilliant teachers, these educators who I've learned so much from, and I've learned how to be a better researcher because of them. My name is Liana Cabral again. I wanted to just take a very brief opportunity to preview a microsite that we are going to be sharing soon that is dedicated to our work with Black teachers. So we partnered with HopeWorks to build a digital archive that includes this important research and can be used as a tool for Black teachers to engage with, and other teachers as well, and share Black teachers' experiences and stories. Our hope is that this microsite will elevate the perspectives and experiences of Black teachers, inform the field of education on how to better support and retain them, and also serve as a space for Black teachers to engage with one another and feel validated and seen. The podcast will also be available on our microsite, as well as blogs and other content that will be occasionally added. We'll be launching soon, so please stay tuned for the launch. If you registered for this event, which you did because you're here, we'll be sending information about it out soon through that, through an email blast. And in just a moment, I'll be dropping the link to listen to the full episodes before the microsite is up. And with that, I'll pass it to my colleague, Kevin.
Thank you, Liana. So it's Kevin Burgess. I'm a RFA researcher that worked on this project, and participatory action research requires action. So as we close, we wanted to leave you with a few action items to partner with us in moving the work forward. First off, we'd like you guys to share the podcast. One of the big things with the podcast is helping us change the narrative in terms of Black teachers being undervalued, the strength that they bring to the classroom, all the things that they add to education in general, the irreplaceable skills that they have. Black teachers are vital, and we think this podcast is a way to help change the narrative about Black teachers. Leanna's going to drop the Spotify link in the chat now. And then secondly, we'd like you to engage with the microsite that Liana just alluded to. So we'd like for you, once it's launched, which will be happening very soon, look out for an email from us about the official launch date. We'd like for you to visit and contribute. There'll be many different ways for you to get engaged and plugged in. We'd also like for you to stay current about what's happening at RFA. So there's a newsletter, and Liana's going to drop that link in the chat as well. That'll share kind of the big highlights, what's going on at Research for Action, so you can kind of stay engaged and plugged in. And finally, we'd like for you to follow us on our social media accounts, your preferred one. So we're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Threads, which I just learned about today, and then Blue Sky. So if you would do that, that would be great. So thank you very much. And with that, I'll pass it to my colleague, Alita.
Hello. Just if we could just give another round of applause virtually, just as we get ready to do some acknowledgements, just not only for everyone also being here, but a special thank you to Vicky and Andrea for their contributions. Also, we would like to acknowledge Minyang and Quinn. We also could have not have done podcast work without our wonderful and amazing sound engineers, Sergio from PhillyCam, Felicia at Detroit is Different, and thanks to our sound editor, Anthony from the Grill Studio. We also want to thank the funders of the podcast, Independence Public Media Foundation and the Horace W. Goldsmith Foundation. Also the funders of our Voices for Change PAR project, and that is Spring Point Partners and Bezos Family Foundations. A huge thank you to DeQuindra, our communications director, for helping us with the mini logistics of our listening party and everything communication, strategic communication related. And also we want to thank our leadership within RFA, Research for Action, for their support and guidance throughout this project. But without further ado, please commend yourself and give a round of applause to yourselves for attending and staying abreast with all that we have coming and the work that we have done today and just being in this space together. So thank you, everyone.